The night the storm came, it did not knock politely on our door. It arrived with thunder that shook the windows and rain that poured as if the sky itself had been holding back tears for years. I remember standing by the kitchen sink, watching the lightning tear across the darkness, feeling a strange heaviness in my chest that had nothing to do with the weather. Arav was late again. In the early years of our marriage, I used to wait for him with excitement, checking the clock every few minutes, imagining the sound of his key turning in the lock. But over time, the waiting had changed. It had become quieter, more uncertain, filled with questions I was too afraid to ask. That night, the storm outside felt like a reflection of the storm growing silently within our home. When we first met, we were two simple souls with uncomplicated dreams. Arav was kind, patient, and steady, the kind of man who listened more than he spoke. I was talkative, hopeful, and full of plans for a life built on trust and shared laughter. We did not have much money, but we had something far more precious: faith in each other. We promised that no matter how hard life became, we would always choose honesty over pride and love over ego. For years, we kept that promise. We faced job losses, family illnesses, and the pressures of building a home from scratch. We learned to stretch every rupee, to celebrate small victories, and to hold hands through disappointments. Love, we believed, was not just a feeling but a decision we made every single day. But life has a way of testing even the strongest promises. Arav's new job demanded long hours and frequent travel. At first, I was proud of him. His hard work was finally being recognized, and our financial worries slowly eased. Yet with each promotion came distance. Our dinners together became rare. Conversations that once lasted hours were reduced to brief exchanges about bills and responsibilities. I told myself this was temporary, that sacrifice was part of growth. Still, in the quiet moments of the night, I felt a loneliness that I struggled to admit even to myself. The rumors reached me before the truth did. A neighbor mentioned seeing Arav at a cafe with a woman from his office. She spoke casually, unaware of the tremor her words caused in my heart. I smiled politely, refusing to let suspicion take root. Arav had always been respectful, always careful with boundaries. I trusted him. And yet, doubt is like a tiny crack in glass. Once it appears, it spreads quietly. I began noticing small changes. He guarded his phone more carefully. He seemed distracted, often lost in thought. When I asked if something was wrong, he would simply say he was tired. The stormy night was the breaking point. Arav arrived home drenched, his clothes smelling of rain and unfamiliar perfume. It was faint, but it was there. My heart pounded so loudly I could barely hear the thunder. He avoided my eyes as he hung his coat. The silence between us felt heavier than the clouds outside. I wanted to shout, to demand answers, but years of love and respect held me back. Instead, I asked softly, "Are you happy, Arav?" My question surprised him. He looked at me as if he had not expected such honesty. For a long moment, he said nothing, and in that silence, I felt the fragile thread of our marriage trembling. Tears filled his eyes before words did. He confessed that he had grown close to someone at work. It had begun innocently, he said, with shared projects and long conversations about stress and ambition. She admired him, appreciated his efforts, and listened to his frustrations. He admitted that he had allowed himself to enjoy the attention, to find comfort in her presence. Though he insisted that nothing physical had happened, he acknowledged that his heart had drifted in a way that betrayed our vows. Emotional infidelity, he called it, his voice shaking with regret. The storm outside roared louder, as if echoing the turmoil within us. In that moment, I felt a pain deeper than anger. It was the pain of realizing that somewhere along the way, we had stopped sharing our burdens with each other. I had been so focused on supporting him that I had forgotten to express my own loneliness. He had been so determined to succeed that he had forgotten to protect the emotional boundaries of our marriage. We stood there, two imperfect people who had once promised forever, now facing the consequences of silence and neglect. I could have walked away. Pride urged me to. But love, though wounded, whispered for patience. The days that followed were not easy. Trust, once cracked, does not mend overnight. I questioned everything: his words, his schedule, even my own worth. Arav ended all contact with the woman immediately, transferring to another department despite the risk to his career. He offered transparency without being asked, leaving his phone unlocked, sharing details of his day. Yet the true healing did not come from these gestures alone. It came from long, painful conversations where we confronted our fears without blaming each other. We spoke about the loneliness we had both felt, about the expectations we had silently placed on one another. For the first time in years, we listened deeply. There were nights when I cried quietly, wondering if I would ever feel secure again. Arav would sit beside me, not defending himself, not rushing my healing, but simply staying. His remorse was not loud or dramatic. It was steady and consistent. He began coming home earlier, not because I demanded it, but because he wanted to rebuild what he had nearly lost. We started taking evening walks together, just as we had during our early days of marriage. Those walks became our safe space, where we could speak honestly about our dreams and disappointments. Slowly, I realized that forgiveness is not a single act, but a journey. It requires courage from the one who forgives and humility from the one who seeks forgiveness. I chose to forgive not because the betrayal did not hurt, but because I believed our love was worth fighting for. Arav chose to change not because he was forced, but because he understood the depth of his mistake. We learned that emotional distance can be just as damaging as any visible wrongdoing, and that guarding a relationship requires daily effort. Months later, another storm passed through our town. This time, as thunder echoed across the sky, Arav and I sat together by the window, holding hands. The memory of that painful night still lingered, but it no longer controlled us. Instead, it reminded us of how close we had come to losing everything. Challenges had reshaped us, teaching us humility and empathy. We had discovered that love is not about perfection, but about perseverance. It is about choosing each other again and again, even after disappointment. Our story is not one of flawless romance. It is a story of two people who stumbled but refused to let their mistakes define their future. We learned that communication is the lifeline of any relationship and that unspoken pain can quietly create distance. Most importantly, we understood that true strength lies not in avoiding storms, but in facing them together. The night that once threatened to tear us apart ultimately brought us closer, because it forced us to confront truths we had long ignored. Today, when young couples ask us the secret to a lasting marriage, we do not speak of grand gestures or constant happiness. We speak of respect, of listening even when it is uncomfortable, of protecting emotional boundaries as fiercely as physical ones. We tell them that infidelity does not always begin with betrayal. Sometimes it begins with silence, with small gaps that slowly widen. And we remind them that healing is possible when there is genuine remorse and sincere effort. The stormy night changed everything between us, but not in the way I once feared. It changed our understanding of love. It taught us that love is not fragile glass that shatters beyond repair. It is more like gold, tested by fire and refined through hardship. Our scars remain, but they are reminders of growth rather than pain. In choosing forgiveness, we found deeper intimacy, not the kind built on excitement alone, but the kind built on trust restored and promises renewed. As I look back now, I realize that the greatest lesson that night gave us was this: relationships do not fail because of a single mistake. They fail when people stop caring enough to mend what is broken. Love demands effort, honesty, and the courage to admit when we are wrong. It asks us to see our partner not as an opponent, but as a companion in life's unpredictable journey. The storm outside eventually faded into silence, but the transformation it sparked within our hearts continues to guide us. And so, if there is one truth our story carries, it is that even in moments of betrayal and heartbreak, hope can survive. When two hearts are willing to confront their flaws and fight for their bond, even the darkest night can lead to a brighter dawn. The storm that once threatened to destroy us became the very reason we learned how to truly love, proving that sometimes the hardest trials shape the most meaningful relationships.